Welcome to the Spirit-Led Men at Work podcast, where I interview Christian men from all walks of life with varying job titles who have one thing in common. They are all choosing daily to be led by the Holy Spirit at their work. And because of that, they are leading, prospering, glorifying God, and experiencing joy and purpose in their work. And you can too. Welcome, Spirit-Led Men at Work, to Episode 8. This is the second half of an interview I had with Bill Fraine. I encourage you, if you haven't listened to it already, to go back to Episode 7 and listen to the first half. We've been talking with Bill Fraine, and Bill was born in Boston, Massachusetts, number 7 of 9 children in a Catholic family. In the first episode, Bill talked about the very interesting story about how he was saved, how he came to be a Christian. He also talked about his rise in FedEx from a handler washing trucks up to senior vice president, reporting directly to Fred Smith, the founder and CEO, and some other successes he had. And then he talked to us about a very difficult time in his life where he and his wife were doing very well financially in the real estate buying and selling business in Florida. And then when the market crashed, they were basically broke, and he went for over a year without a job. And he was praying to God for guidance on what he should do. And that's where we're going to pick it up in this episode, where Bill talks about how God responded to this prayer during this very difficult time in his life. So let's get right to the second half of this interview.
And I did this, and I remember one day it just hit me. It came over me. I was just praying and praying and praying. And it's funny, some days I'd pray and I wouldn't even know how many times I walked up and down. I just would walk up and down. And I stopped, and it just hit me. The Lord just said to me, my words, Bill, I got this. You're good. And I thought, I just kept walking and thinking about it. And his point was, look, all my words are true. So I stopped praying what I was praying, because I was always praying for me. I was always praying, Lord, please, 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 what are you going to do? And I was telling him all my problems. I was telling him what was going on. I was telling him about my worry for my daughters. And he told me he got it. So I stopped and I looked around, and all these homes I'd been walking back and forth in front of all these days were all foreclosed. They were all closed down. Grass was growing tall, and they were beautiful homes. And it just hit me that all these people went through what I went through. All these people lost everything. And this was a 2-mile street, homes not that far apart, probably an acre a home. And I just stopped praying for me. I started praying same thing. I continued up and down the streets for about another month, praying. But I prayed for all these people. I had my hands in the air, and I said, Lord, I walked by the house. I'd put up the number, Lord, house number 2201, Lord. Take care of this family, Lord. Give them the desires of their hearts, Lord. And I'd say, Lord, I know you got me. I'm good. I know, Lord, that no weapon will formed against me will prosper. I know, Lord, that your angels will care for me and lift me up. I won't even dash my foot in a stone. I know, Lord, you have this. I know it, Lord. And you're planning the future for me already. And you have it in place. And when it is time, you'll deliver it to me. I kept praying this. And my brother Mike, I remember Brother Mike, who doesn't believe. And we were sitting one day in the back, and he has like a nice little lanai sitting out there talking. And he said, Bill, what are you going to do? And he said, my brother's great. My family's great. And he said, you can stay here as long as you need. Now, I'll give you $15,000 if you need it. I was like, Mike, I'm not taking anything. I can't. I said, I can't take anything. And I'll stay here. I'll stay here as long as we need to. But the Lord, I said, listen, the Lord's got this. He really does. I said, I know it sounds strange to you, but the Lord's got this. And I remember telling me, he goes, Bill, I hope you're doing more than that. I said, Mike, I'm doing everything I can, man. So anyways, I went across to Miami because we had a bank over there, and I had to get, it's about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. I had to get a check. So I was getting down to the last dollars we had. I was sitting there. There's a little chicken place there. I remember it was like a polo place. It was a little, Latin chicken place. And I was sitting outside in the truck, this beat up truck, and just kind of sitting there looking around at people and just praying to the Lord and asking him for favor and just, show me what he wanted me to do. And don't let this be the last dollars we have. And Lord, help us. And my phone rang, And I got a call from this guy that I knew in 1980, probably 4, maybe 5. He was a kid then, just starting out. He's a telephone sales guy at FedEx. I was a director at FedEx, and I think I was like 27. I was that much older. I was, like I said, I was a young director, but I was like a cool guy to these guys, and I liked them all, and I treated them all well. And he goes, Bill, this is John Demos, and man, I'm sitting here with Steve Kirpin, who was another guy who worked for me. He goes, we just want to tell you, man, we were just talking about the greatest days of our lives at FedEx. He said, and I want to let you know that, you were the coolest guy, and your name kept coming up, so we just called you to say hey and see what's going on. And I said, John, if we talked a little while, I said, John, man, you guys are so cool, and they told me what they were doing, and they were doing good. I said, I'm so proud of you, not a surprise. And then at the end, he said, so what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm looking for work. He goes, well, a guy like you, man, you can get whatever you want. He goes, I have jobs, but they're probably not anything you'd want. And I said, John, you'd be surprised what I want right now. And so anyways, long story short, John worked at Aramark, and, months later, I'm working at Aramark, and I was a head of sales and a nice job, nothing dramatic, just a good job. I would take anything. I told the Lord it was a good job. Running a sales team up in Long Island, and it paid well enough for us to get there. We had just enough money to get there, and I could go through miracle after miracle, but that kind of time. How he got us there and what he did for us, and getting into a house and just everything, just amazing how the Lord was. And I had just enough money to get through to the first paycheck, and then we had enough money to get by, and did well. It wasn't going to be anything that was going to change our lives, but it was a job. I was blessed. My wife was happy. The kids were happy. We had a good place to live. I was engaged in work again. And this went on for about 1.5 years, and I was doing great there. I do have good skills. The Lord puts favor on me. And next thing you know, I'm running the whole New York group, and I got promotions in front of me, and the whole team of Aramark's talking to me and want me to do more and more. And I was very content, very happy, and blessing the Lord for it. And all the time, by the way, even the broke days, we tithed. That's what I went over to get the check for. We always tithed, because we knew that was part of our job. That was part of our being His man. Was tithing. If I had $1, he got 10 cents. But I always tithed. I learned early on. The other thing I read in the Bible early on, like one of the first days, was beginning of knowledge is fear of the Lord. And it doesn't mean you're afraid of it. It means everything comes from Him. And I know that. So I knew that, and I wasn't going to give that up. That would just let my family down. So anyways, doing the job at Aramark, and I got a call from a headhunter who, in the worst days of my life, I had reached out to. He basically told me a very long story about why I was a has-been. He was being polite. I'm sure he thought he was helping me out, but I was over the hill and really hadn't done much. And this, I was a big flash in the pan back years ago, but now I'm no good. And he had nothing for me. I was like, whoa, that's something I really wasn't thinking I was going to hear. Anyways, he called me out of the blue. And I remember being home. I remember because he called me. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And he starts going, you have to know a headhunter if you haven't dealt with them. They run right into the sale. Bill, listen. I won't give you his name, but Bill, listen, I want to tell you about this great opportunity. It's in Greensboro area and wonderful. And, going to be a Fortune 500 company, just a tremendous thing. He's going the whole, and I go, excuse me, listen, I don't have any time. And I hung up. And my wife was standing near me, and she looks over. She goes, so you finished praying about that quickly, and you had the Lord's answer. And I was like, dang, I hate it when she's right. Throws the prayer card. So we prayed about it, and I called him back, and I said, all right, listen. He told me the whole story again. I said, listen, here's what I'll do. I said, I'm going to get out and take the interview, and I'll see what's up, but stop selling me. So, and I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, look, I don't want this job. I'm very content here. I don't want this to be something that the enemy's using to pull me away from something you have me doing. So I'm going to treat it that's what it is. And I'll go here and I'll listen, but unless you make this something you want me to do, I'm not doing it. So I flew down there. I forget what airplane I was on, but the entire magazine I picked up was all about Greensboro. That was kind of funny. I remember thinking that, okay, Lord, that's pretty good. And then I got there and I met the team, and I met the owner, who I liked right away. He was a Fred Smith, just amazing guy. And I liked him right away. I liked the bones. I always call it bones. The company had really good bones, really good structure, and it was very clear. But I left there, and the same thing. I said, Lord, I don't want this job. I understand what's going on here. Unless you make it my job, I don't want it. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to make any phone calls. I'm not going to do follow-up. I'm not doing anything. You have got to bring this to me. I went back, and 3 months went by. I was doing my job, and that's fine. It didn't bother me. I wasn't upset. Didn't mind not getting the job. I really didn't want to give the other guy any money. I was Christian, but I still had a little grudge against him. And And I got a call from the guy, the guy who called me originally, the company guy. And he said, yeah, Bill, we'd like you to come down again and have another interview and a dinner at the CEO's house. And I said, well, okay. So I went down, met with him. And he started talking to me about all these things he wanted me to do and what he wanted to use me for. And I listened, but I went back and prayed about it again. And I said, Lord, you've got to show me that this is something you want me to do. You've got to make this something you want me to do. And a friend of ours who we knew really well is a woman who's a just amazing woman. She runs an adoption home for children in Durham that just have terrible, really tough lives. And she called me and she just said, Bill, I want you to know something. The Lord's really been putting something in my heart and he's going to bring you to North Carolina. I was like, she lives in North Carolina. I was like, all right, that's pretty good. So I got a call back on the job, took the job. And the last thing I'll say on all this is what I said earlier. The things that have happened since I've been here, I couldn't have, from the time I sat in my mother-in-law's house to the time I sit at right now, I could not on my best day have even thought of putting the events together that got me here. Never mind actually put them together. It is just such a mixed up, mashed up bunch of stuff that never should have happened. Like the call from the guy who was just talking about me, who hadn't seen me in years, and he and his buddy were having a beer and wanted to tell me what a great guy I was. When I always say, when I look back on the Lord, it's always 20/20 vision. It's amazing what he did, but I couldn't have thought of this. I couldn't have gotten here. I was that has-been. I was done, and nobody was going to bring me back to what I'm back to now. And the person I ended up working for, the CEO, he's a great guy, but he's very in his ways. He was an entrepreneur, built his own company. Everybody's like, he'll never have this. He'll never have that. He'll never let you do this. I do all that. He's given me all that. He's done all that. And I know it's all the Lord. I know it's all the Lord's favor. But so yeah, it was funny. It was probably the most important part of my Christian walk because it was the Lord, getting me in a position for work he's wanted me to do. And there's nothing that scares me. All my daughters are saved. My wife's saved. There's nothing anybody can do to me right now because I know we're all going to end up together with the Lord forever. And he's taken me through the worst I ever thought I could go through and has come out the other side. And it's not because he raised me back up. It's because he did things in my life that I didn't care if he did. I wasn't looking for him to do. He did it just to show off and show his grace to me. That's what amazes me about it.
That is awesome. So many gems from that story. Thanks so much for sharing that. I just wanted to point out a couple things that I noted along the way as you told that story. One of them was the fact that you had identified yourself with your original accomplishments at FedEx, and there was a shift at one point where you had a different identity.
Yeah, and it was funny. I'll tell you, one of the hardest things for me was, I had an arch enemy at FedEx when I left there, and it really wasn't me. I'm not that kind of guy. If you get to know me, I'm really not. Things roll off my back pretty easy, and I'm always about getting the job done. So I'll work with the worst guy in the room just to get the job done. But this guy he kind of had his way for a long time in the company, and he was, the founder's guy, and he may not even know the stuff that went on between us in my mind. He might not even have agreed with me that we had these challenges. But when I came along, I got, I think I rubbed him in a certain way. He rubbed me in a certain way. And it was me having him know in my mind, the first thing I thought of, I remember sitting in my mother-in-law's house thinking, he's going to know that I'm broke and I lost everything. I remember that thought in my head, that he's going to know that. And so I called him up and I told him, because I knew I had to. I was in sleep one night and the Lord just put it in my heart. And I called him up and I said, and I asked him for a job is what I actually did. And that was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do because it was so much my pride that I had to let go of to do that. And I did it honestly, and he turned me down. And it wasn't being mean. He just didn't have anything for me. But it was more about me having to say that to him, me having to tell him what I was going through, because it was always, I was the guy he was shooting for. He was the guy I was shooting for, and he won. And that's kind of what I was telling him. And it was something I could never, even as much of a Christian as I was, man, I'm still a competitive guy. I could never do that, but it was important to the Lord that I realized that everything I had from then on came from him. That everything I'd accomplished before that I was proud of was all something I did without him. And I think it was important for the Lord for me to know that. He doesn't need me to know anything, but it was important for me to know that because he needed me to do things now that like I said, I have no fear, because it doesn't matter what happens. I get in the worst situations at work still. These things still happen with clients, with individuals, with employees, with the rest. And I come home at night and I pray about it. And it's amazing how the next day or the next week or the next month, everything works out to what it's supposed to be.
That's awesome. The other thing I just was thinking about was, I mean, obviously you're an ambitious, you're a smart, go-getter guy. You always have been. But as I listen to your story, I heard you talk about how you would never have been able to have imagined or planned the steps that God took you through. In other words, you weren't controlling the whole situation during that phase of your life, and you're still the same man in terms of, capable, talented, ambitious, and all that. But it seems like you're stepping back and allowing God to move in your life.
Yeah, it's what I was very good at, and it was more of a natural thing. It's who I am. Like I said, I have a high school diploma. The thing I've been able to do from early on in my life, my dad used to always call it figuring things out. I've always been able to figure things out. I can look at a process, and after a very short period of time, I can understand the process, and not just understand the process. I can understand the critical process indicators and process pieces that drive the process and make it work. So I can look at something and say, okay, I get it. So now these are the 10 things that are critical. At FedEx, we called them CSPs, critical sort points. So critical sort point was where a package took a different direction. That's a simple one to explain. So I have a package. I'm going to put it into a container. One container is going to Boston. One's going to LA. That's a critical sort point, because if I make a mistake, that package is never going to be delivered on time. So we were a company that was built around critical sort points. You said a CSP, PST. Critical sort point had primary, secondary, tertiary plans to make sure it went the right way. And that's how my life's always been. I think that way. It's just natural for me. I don't know why. It's like people can play baseball or play music. I can play processes. But the other part of that I was good at was the people process. And that was, I could look at a job I wanted to get, or a place I wanted to be. I could see very clearly the people I had to get close to do that, and the things I had to do to impress them, to make them notice who I was, and get myself that. So a big part of what I've always learned in life and work is it's you hear people say it's who you know, not what you know. That's a big part of it. And it doesn't mean you go kiss butt, or it doesn't mean you go do things that aren't natural. I still do it today. But what I know is, just like a process, I know that these 3 people are the people that drive the thing I want to get done. So I've got to get some relationship with those 3 people in some way to get me what I need to get, whether it's a client I need to do something with, whether it's a set of employees, whether it's a bunch of peers. I know that I have to do these things to get there. And I say these things, but in my mind, it happens rapid fire. So they just happen naturally. I'm just walking about the day, but those are happening. But that was the difference in my life before, where now that's all. I look to the Lord for that. In other words, it's not me. I'm not pointing to this guy saying, look what I did. I'm pointing to this guy saying, man, this is pretty cool, because he always does it. I'll sit there and say, okay, Lord, look, I've got this problem right now, and I have this problem with this individual, these individuals, or this thing. And, I don't know what to do. I'm not going to spend the time figuring it out. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to wait on you, and I'm going to do my work, and I'm just going to breathe. And then you're going to show me the path, and it always happens. It always happens. Now, don't get me wrong. I put effort out. I'm always working hard. I'm always being successful at what I do. I'm not sitting around on my couch waiting for God to show up. I'm doing my job at 100% of my abilities every day, everything it takes to get the job done. I'm making sure my team's successful, taking care of clients. What I'm not doing is, in the middle of all that, I'm not trying to finagle the next thing. Because what I've realized is, Lord, if you want me to have it, you'll give it to me. And if you don't want me to have it, it's not meant for me. So I'm not going to, because there are things that I've gotten into in life that weren't ready for me, right? They were paths I went down that later I was like, why did I do this? A friend of mine used to say that sometimes the best job you ever had was the last job you had. So you can make that mistake. So that's really, I would say, has changed is I can still be successful, but between me and him, I know who it is. I know where it came from, and I enjoy that success so much more because I know I'm in his will. I know I'm doing his will. I know where I am. A great example was I came into this company to run sales and marketing, which was, if you looked at my life, it was probably 60% of my work. I was either in operations or in sales, but 60% of my life was in sales and marketing. And if you know me and if you listen to me, that's part of my, even when I'm doing operations, it's part of my ilk. It's kind of who I am. I'm a vision. I'm a guy who likes to put a big vision. You know, as the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. I believe that. I believed that before I knew the verse. So I'm a big picture. I like to create a vision for people because they can get behind a vision. But now, what I try to make sure I do now is I make sure that if I just do my work, if I just breathe, if I pray, if I'm the Lord's man, He brings it. So I came in doing sales and marketing, and the person I worked for was never, ever going to have a COO, would never have a chief operating officer, ever. He would never give up that power. So he called me in one day and started talking to me about this job he wanted to do, and it was an operations job, and he wanted me to move to operations. Like, look, whatever you want me to do, I'm good. And then he started laying it out, and then he did the whole thing, and he never talked about that title ever. I was going to be a EVP, which is what I was, an executive vice president. There's about 5 of us in the company, but he's going to move me to operations to take over a big portion of the operations. And it wasn't until he put the announcement out that it said Bill Fraine will become the new chief operating officer of the company. Everybody was shocked. I mean, people been there 30 years, couldn't believe it. Never happened. And that's my point. I didn't go for that job. I didn't ask for that job. I was doing sales. I was doing marketing. I was working with the team. But as Lewis would say, Lewis would say, there was just, Bill, I saw that you had more talent than I was getting out of you and more ability. And that's the favor the Lord puts on us, right? That's the point, is that, yeah, I worked hard, but my dad worked hard his entire life for 35 years, 36 years at the phone company, never got to be COO, never got to be recognized. So that's what the Lord does. And that's probably the biggest change I've seen in my work career is I'm over me. I don't get excited about me. I'll do the meaningless task. It doesn't bother me. I know the Lord's with me, and whatever I'm doing, I know He has me there. And if He wants me to do something else, I will. And so you can't offend me. It was pretty tough before. It's impossible now. You can't offend me. You can't. I don't lose my cool, which I could definitely do before. I don't lose my cool to things. I just sit back and go, okay, that was interesting. And then I say, Lord, what's going to happen here? And I watch, and sure enough, it goes whatever direction it needs to go in. But I'm just kind of skating through and breathing. It's just not an issue for me.
Sounds like a good life to me. All right. I want to make a transition here to what we call the spirit round, where basically I'm going to ask you a few questions, brief questions that I ask each of the men that I interview, and they're all related to work. The first question is, in your opinion, what is the greatest misunderstanding that men have about their work?
I would say, I'll speak secular and then spiritual. I would say that most men like me thought my work was my life, right? I had somebody say to me one time, and I believe this, what you do is who you are. And I've seen that happen to people where they were superstars. I went through this. Is what I meant when I talked about FedEx, is I was always that. It wasn't as much I was a senior VP of this or that. I was an executive, one of 4 executives who worked for the founder at one of the top companies in the history of the world. I mean, that's who I was. So, yeah. And when you leave there, that's a tough thing not to be that anymore. And I've seen that. You see it in sports, right? You see a sports person who's been a superstar in sports all of a sudden becomes some guy. I mean, they go back to the same team and they're on the sidelines. They're not the star anymore. They're just somebody talking. Look at like a Joe Namath today, right? So it's to me, that's the biggest misnomer, I think, as a person, forget spirit, that we think our job is our life and it's not. Now, as a man of God, my biggest role in the world is, 1, to be in the Lord's will, but 2, my family is my mission field. My wife and my daughters are my mission field. I could be great at everything. If my daughters grew up not to know the Lord and my wife wasn't close to the Lord, what a failure I would be. When I got to stand in front of the Lord, what am I going to say? I accomplished all these things, but I lost my family. They're not here with me. How could that ever be? So to me, that's number one, that we understand that God brought man and woman together to be as one. And then He told us to go forth and multiply. I mean, there's a reason why He didn't say, go get a really good at Walmart. That's what I believe that we mess up on. And it's funny, when I see people go through what I went through, and they'll say to me, well, yeah, my wife and I are going through a divorce. The job and everything. And I listen, it breaks my heart because I was that guy. I remember that. I remember how normal it felt to me. And I look at it now and I'm like, no, man, you're missing the whole thing. That's the only thing you were supposed to do when you got here. Everything else was window dressing. Only thing you're supposed to do here was keep your family together. Only thing you were supposed to do here was bring your children to the Lord and teach them his way and raise them in his word. That's the only thing you were supposed to do. Everything else is fine to fail at. That is not something you can fail at. So that's what I would say the biggest mistake a person, man or woman, makes in business is losing sight. And especially a Christian man or woman is losing sight of what God's will is for you. It's not to make the most money and tithe the most. It's not to be successful and give all the glory to God. It's not to do anything other than bring your children up in the Lord, pray for your family, pray for your wife, be one together, make their lives in the Lord complete, make your life in the Lord complete, and everything else will come from that. What does he tell us? Keep first my kingdom and all else will be added to you. He doesn't say, get all the junk you can, and then when you get time, take care of your family, right? That's what I'd say the biggest mistake is.
Talk to us about the importance of excelling or doing well in our job in light of your Christian faith.
Yeah, there's a two things. It's excelling and it's also who you are, right? We have a set of values at work, and they're great values, right? They're things like collaborative and dependable and trustworthy and safety focused and people focused. And they're great. And listen, I support those and I preach them all day long at work. But so if I don't espouse those things, if I don't espouse trustworthiness and I don't espouse people focus and safety focus, if I'm the person then it's like a dad who tells their kids not to curse and curses all day long, right? You're teaching them by what you do, not by what you say. So at work, when you're known to be a Christian, and it's usually out, people know. I mean, they know. If you come in my office, there's a sign behind my desk that says "Wise men still seek Him," and people know it's going to come up in a conversation. It's pretty normal. The great part of North Carolina is it's pretty prevalent in the business. Most people are. I mean, but not everybody. But the bigger thing is, even to the other Christians. I'm in a company that's very hard charging. I've been in meetings where it's F this and F that, and people screaming and hollering and yelling, and someone's getting chewed out. I can't be that guy. Now, listen, I will fire somebody because that's the right job. I will fire somebody if they fail. I'll respect them and I'll honor them, but I'll fire them. I will hold people accountable. I will call you out on the carpet if you didn't do your job, especially if you let down your team, especially if things you can't do around me is not take care of your people or abuse your people or abuse your trust. But I can never do that in a fruit of the spirit way. I just can't, because that will then, to everybody in the room, show them the same thing not believing in the values showed them is Bill's full of junk. Oh, that's the Christian man. Oh, I see what he does. And the problem for me, and it's not a problem, but you're one. There's only one COO. I'm one. So everybody knows me. I could go around the office and people kid me. I call you, hey, kid, hey, guy, what's going on? I don't know everybody's name. I've got 20,000 plus employees I'm working with. I know most of them and they know me, and I'm very open to all the employees and I'll talk to anybody, but I'm not going to remember everybody's name that I walk up and see it. But they all know me. I'm Bill. And so when I act up or I do something, everybody saw it. And it's talked about, and it's in the grapevine through the company. So I remember, we talked about this the other day together, David, is I know I'm God's ambassador. I know I represent the king. And when I'm there, I can't put any smudge on the king's name at all. That just can't happen.
Okay, what is your favorite scripture? And you might even call it your life verse, and tell us why it's your favorite.
My favorite, I have like 20 million favorites, but the one I turn to the most is and I got to think from it, Hebrews 11:1. I always say 11:3 or 11:1. I get them backwards. But it's by faith we know that the worlds were formed by the hands of God, and the things which we see are not controlled by the things which we see. And the reason I like that, and I could go back to ones in Psalm 91 and Psalm 23 and in other areas in Hebrews and Peter, but the reason my favorite, the one I hang on to the most, is it reminds me of what everything's all about. No matter what happens to me in life, that reminds me who's in charge. It just reminds me that I'll see somebody come in. I'll have somebody work for me who's just a snake. They're just a dirty little snake, and I got to deal with it. I got to deal with it. But my first thing is the old Bill, man. That person would have just 5-15 minutes. and I've got to deal with them. And so I've got to directly talk to them and go through it all. But really my thought is, just good. So, but that reminds me that what they're doing to me and what I'm going to do to them has nothing to do with me and them. It has nothing to do with what's going on physically. There's a spiritual world around us. And I told you this before, but I read this book by Frank Peretti called This Present Darkness. And in the book, it gave a view, a pretty cool book, but in the book, it gave a view that everybody in the world in this story either has demons behind them or angels behind them. And it doesn't mean they're demon possessed. It just means if you're a Christian, the demons aren't allowed to touch you. The angels are there, and they're it's really cool. But anytime a demon comes up, they're non-glorified. They're covered in they're like 9 feet tall in these dark robes. But if a demon comes up, all of a sudden they'll pull back the robe and this bright light shoots out. And they're like, ooh, and they all walk away. But the demons are allowed to be in everybody else's head, so that you'll see somebody, and again, they might be normal people, but when you say something to them, it's the demon responding, and then they say it. So it's like, well, you never cared about me. And the demon will say that, and they say, well, you never cared about me. But that sticks with me because that's how I see things. That's why that verse sticks with me, because it reminds me that, look, God created all these things. I say this all the time. From the time the earth cooled, this conversation was planned. You didn't know me. I didn't know you. But if you think of all the things that had to happen, all the members of your family that had to be created, all the members of my family that had to be created, and how they had to all come together. If one hadn't met one, or one thing happened at a certain time, we would never be at this place at the same time. But the Lord did this so we would have this time and this conversation. I know that. Not a question. So as it was cooling, as he was brooding over the waters, this was in his mind. He had this plan. And that's what that reminds me of, is that the Lord's created all this. He's in charge of it all, and it doesn't matter what's going on around us. It's always about him.
That's a good one. Okay, a lot of us are looking for better ways to leverage our commute to and from work. You mentioned about a book by Frank Peretti. I know there's audiobooks out there, podcasts. Is there anything in particular that you could recommend that would help our listeners be spirit-led when they get to work?
It's funny. I'm in North Carolina, so I listen to 8:30 a.m. radio on the way in, and it's a Christian channel. It's called The Truth Network. And I'm sure it's in other places. It sounds like it's pretty big, but I never knew it till I got here. And in the morning at 8 o'clock is John MacArthur, who I love. And I like him because he reminds me of actually, what's his name? Pastor in Memphis. Come back to it in a minute. But anyways, he's very narrow in his view. What I mean by that, he's very Bible driven, which I love. That's the biggest thing I look for in a church. Biggest thing I look for in a conversation is I'm not about a faith, meaning a Baptist or a Methodist, or I'm about a Bible. Wherever I go, if the Bible is what's being taught and the person is spirit filled in the Bible and I'm listening to them. Excuse me, Adrian Rogers is the person I was thinking about in Memphis. And he's like Adrian Rogers. Adrian Rogers always would say this. I love the way he talked. He'd say, your view has to be very narrow. He always say, view has to be very narrow. And when he's talking about, he talked about, like in Revelations, when he talked about, you allow that Jezebel in your church. And he was saying, the point he was making was, we allow Jezebel in our lives all the time because we think it's okay. It's just somebody who's a friend of ours, and what they do isn't that bad. Or, we allow, and he said, you can't. If you want to walk with God, your view has to be that narrow. And that's how I look at John MacArthur. A lot of people say he's tough sometimes, very narrow, but what I love is, he's a very good Bible teacher. I can weed out and filter out the things that I think maybe a little bit one way or the other. But what I love is I learn more about the Bible and about pieces of the Bible. I never thought that way. I was like, man, that's really good. I read that thing 30 times. I never saw that part. And so I love his stuff. But what I do is every morning, I either do that or I do K-Love. And the reason is I would prefer, I'd put on ESPN. I love sports. Especially love Go Patriots. I love sports. So I would rather, I had my druthers, and if I put that on first in the morning sometimes, I'll get mad because I'll get to work and I listen to the whole thing. But I have much better days at work when I listen to that. There's no question. Because when I get to work, I'm full of the Spirit. I've got something on my mind that I heard that I really liked, and it gave me something. The Lord's just talking to me. And I get there and I get out of the car, and I've got a shield up for a while. It may break down after time at work, but I've got the sword of the Spirit, and I've got the breastplate of righteousness. I'm prepared for work, and that to me is always the better way. And it's funny, there are times when like Patriots are playing, And I'm listening a lot more to ESPN. There was a game on Sunday and I want to hear what they're saying. And then they said something about Monday. And then, so next thing I know, 4 days have gone by and I get to work and I'm cranky and I'm a little bit more paranoid about things. It hits me. I go, you know what? I haven't been doing that. I've been doing this silly thing, listening to sports. And I'm now yelling at the radio and I want to call the guy because I don't like what he said about my team. Instead of being filled with the Spirit when I got out of the car. So to me, that's the biggest thing. I try to do CDs too, but I'm not that good at keeping up with it. So I'll tend to listen to the same one over and over and then get tired of it. But I love, like I said, John MacArthur's great. I'm trying to think the other guy who's on. There's another guy in the morning who's on that I like. But there's 2 or 3 guys. Well, he's on at 8 and there's a guy on at 8:30. And usually by then I'm at work. Yeah, I think it is. It is. Greg Laurie, yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
No, just this. Listen, the Lord, it's what I said earlier about, it's why I like the verse, by faith we know that the worlds were made by the hand of God and the things which we see are not controlled by the things which we see. I don't care. My big thing in life right now is that there is a whole world of Satan trying to make us afraid of everything, right? We got terrorism. We have, just think of every kind of child abuse, every kind of, security threat. We're in North Carolina, so we have to open up my daughter's bathrooms to transvestites, and I have nothing against transvestites, but man, I'm a guy. If I saw a dude walk into a bathroom with my daughter in the bathroom, I would knock that guy out. So my point is, there are so many things that as Christians want to take our mind off the Lord, right? Because we all want to get so mad about these things. I do, I have guns. I have security alarms in my house because I'm smart. I'm not stupid. The Lord gave us those things. It's like saying I'm not going to go to the hospital because, I trust the Lord. I'm going to go to the hospital if I'm sick. I'm going to get a gun because it protects me. I'm not looking to shoot anybody. I'm not trying to be John Wayne, but I'm not going to be the guy who has his house broken into and doesn't have a gun. So, but my point is, I don't focus on that. I don't spend time on that. I don't sit here and keep my gun in my lap all night long. I know the Lord's got me. That's why he had me get a gun. He wants me to use it if I need it. I know he's got me. My point is that we need to stay focused on him more now than ever, because fear is the only weapon that Satan has. It's the only weapon he has. It's all what he wants us all to be. And he wants you to be afraid for your kids. He wants you to be afraid for your husband and wife. He wants you to be afraid of terrorism. He wants to be afraid of the politics and the government and losing all your money and having no retirement. He wants to be afraid of all that. And what Jesus says is, look, in this world you'll have trouble, but I've overcome the world. And that's what we have to keep in front of us. It's not about what you see in front of you, because it doesn't matter. It's not about the fear that you hear. It doesn't matter. It's about the Lord's in charge of all this. And you know what happens at the end if you know Jesus? He's already dealt with all this. All the things you're afraid of, he's already dealt with. He dealt with it on the cross. We're all going to go to heaven. We're all going to live with Jesus forever. And yeah, we have to die to get there, but hey, big secret, we're all going to die. So there's nothing, it's like death wears their sting. There's nothing left that anybody can do to us. As I said before, my focus, my daughters are saved. All 4 of my daughters are saved. My wife is saved. So I know the 6 of us are going to be in heaven together. And I know other people I love are saved too. And I'm trying to talk to everybody else I can about it. But my point is, so what am I fearing? If I'm going to fear my daughter goes out and gets hit by a car, it could happen. I'm going to see her again. I have a fear that my daughter's going to go out and meet a guy who's going to do something to her. Could happen, but I'm going to see her again. I mean, all I'm trying to get at is, it doesn't mean that I don't have the same passion or worries that a dad has about his daughters. I just come back to, okay, Lord, you're in charge of all this, and the things which I see are not controlled by the things which I see. So I don't have to get all crazy. I don't have to be afraid. I just have to turn to him and breathe. That's all I have to do. And I say breathe because it's my version of being still. Is we all want to do something, right? We all forgot about, know that I'm God and be still. Breathe. If all you do is breathe all day long and know the Lord and pray to the Lord, that's all you do, he will do everything else your heart needs to do. He will do it. He says that to you, right? He tells you over and over again. Look at the lilies of the field. Look at the sparrow. He tells us how much he cares for us. He tells us he'll take care of us. And the determination I made when I was broke and had nothing left was not a brilliant determination. Fred Smith at FedEx used to say this all the time. And he said, you know what? When I'm faced with the decision of one, I'm a genius. Meaning when there's no other way to go, I'm really smart. I had no other way to go. I was broke. I had no money. I had 2 4-year-old girls, my wife. I had no home. I had nothing. I determined at that moment when the Lord told me I got this, that I will trust every word you ever say, Lord, and I will never, never, never doubt you, ever. That's been the biggest change in life, and everything is my fear. My lack of fear doesn't come from praying hard, and it comes from knowing God's in charge of all things. So that's what I try to leave you with is, look, in this time of fear and doubt and worry, He's in charge of all things. And if you just pull into Him and listen to Him, read His word, worship Him, take your time. And by the way, listen, I say this to everybody. It's such a big deal. Tithe. That's not a conversation. I'm not in your church. I'm not trying to tell you to help out your pastor. God doesn't need your money. I'm just telling you, that's something that I just learned early on. I have never been able to outgive Him. And I know that every single thing I've ever done in tithing is what got me everything that's happened in my life, positive and negative. But I know that the learning He's given me is because of that, because I'm always obedient there, not just there, but always obedient there, that He knows everything I have is His. He knows that. And it follows that way. But listen, I'll leave you, and God bless. The Lord keep you in all your ways and protect your family and give you peace in all things.
Bill, thanks a lot for this time. This has been awesome. If someone listening wants to reach out to you and chat with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
The best way for me is email, and my private email is Bill, Bill, Fraine. My last name is Fraine. That's N like Nancy, E, and that's at gmail.com. If you send me an email and just reference this, what you in the reference, because you know how Gmail is, you get so much spam and everything. Just reference, I heard you on the podcast with David. I'll see that. But send that to me. I get it on my phone. I get it on my laptop, and I'll be happy to come back to you and reach out to you. God bless.
Men at Work, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. We just heard over the course of 2 episodes about Bill Fraine's journey being Spirit-led at his work. Each of our journeys are unique, but I hope that you've heard something in one or both of these episodes to inspire you and give direction for your own personal daily work life. You can find links and other info from this show at spiritledmen.com/008. Until next time, have a great day and God bless.